When I saw that net jerk like it had a pulse, my breath locked in my chest, because I knew straight off, that thing wasn't a fish. It was dawn off Moss Landing, the kind of dawn that feels older than time, fog draped low, water flat as slate, the world holding its breath. 40 years I've worked these grounds, just me, the boat, and the same battered net. Routine. Familiar. Safe. I hauled hand over hand, expecting the usual weight, maybe rockfish, maybe an old tire, when the mesh lurched once, slow and deliberate, like something thinking. Too strong for kelp, too calm for shark, too heavy for dolphin. I muttered a prayer and heaved. That's when I saw them, eyes. Deep down in the tangles, too dark, steady eyes looking up at me the way a person does when they already know your name. I froze. Salty wind cut my cheeks, but I didn't feel it. The ocean went silent. In that heartbeat I understood, whatever was in my net had chosen me. And right there, before I even drew my next breath, my whole soul started unraveling, though I wouldn't realize it till much later. I dropped to my knees on the deck, palms sweating, pulse hammering like an outboard. The net bulged against the gunwale, sagging with something alive yet eerily patient. I leaned in, praying it wasn't a dying sea lion. But what I saw didn't fit any creature etched in my memory. The body was seal-shaped, yes, but sleeker, skin smooth as wet pewter, not fur. No whiskers, no scars from boat props, just a shimmering hide that caught the gray light like liquid metal. And those eyes, still fixed on me, unblinking, vast, aware. I've untangled plenty of wildlife, panicked pelicans, belligerent rays, but this being didn't thrash or snap. She, and I can't explain how I knew she was a she, but I did, simply waited, chest rising in slow, measured breaths, surrendering to gravity and rope as though the whole scene was a quiet agreement. A tremor of guilt cut through me. Somehow this was my fault. My net. My sea. My responsibility. Easy, girl, I whispered, as if soothing a skittish horse. My knife shook in my fist, old blade, half rust, sharp enough if I pressed. I slit the first strand. The twine recoiled with a wet snap. No reaction from her. She just watched. Second strand. Third. My heartbeat synced to the scrape of steel on rope. I expected, at any moment, a flipper to whip or jaws to clamp. Nothing. She let me work, eyes never leaving mine. Not pleading, trusting. That scared me more than teeth ever could. Half the mesh fell away, revealing her left side. That's when I noticed a deep groove around her midsection, raw and pink where the line had bit in. She'd been hauling that pain God knows how long. Anger flared up, at myself, at every careless fisherman, at the entire gnarly industry I'd signed my life to. I muttered, I'm sorry, not sure if I meant for the cut or the years. Finally, one last knot clung to her fore-flipper. I wedged the knife underneath, sawed slow so I wouldn't nick her flesh. The rope split. Free. She didn't lunge for open water. Instead, she drew a breath so deep I could hear it beneath the surf, then lifted that strange flipper and set it, heavy and warm, on the gunwale beside my hand. Skin to skin. Time fractured. Fog, gulls, the diesel stink of the harbor, all of it faded until there was only the weight of her touch and the impossible certainty that she recognized me. Recognized something in me. I swallowed a tight knot of tears I didn't see coming. You're welcome, I croaked, voice shot to gravel. She held there a full heartbeat, maybe two, then eased back. With a slow, silent slide, she slipped over the rail and vanished beneath the pewter water, leaving no swirl, no splash, just a trembling old man on a deck that suddenly felt too small. I knelt there, knife dangling from numb fingers, staring at the ripples until they smoothed to glass. The sun burned through the fog in slats of pale gold, but I barely noticed. My mind kept replaying that moment. She didn't run. She stayed. She looked at me, like kin. I hauled the torn net aboard and sat against the cabin wall, lungs hitching. Part of me wanted to radio someone, Marine Rescue, the university, anybody, but another voice, older than my years, whispered, "Keep it close. This wasn't for science. It was for you." Hours later, still shaken, I motored back to harbor. A couple deckhands shouted morning greetings. I waved absently. Couldn't speak of it. Who would believe? A sea creature that chose to be caught, waited for my knife, and thanked me before leaving? I convinced myself it was done. A single strange mercy woven into a lifetime of routine. I figured she'd swim off and disappear into the Pacific's endless miles, and that would be that, story over. But the ocean, turns out, had other plans. If your chest just tightened because you swear the wild is watching us too, stick around. The real miracle hadn't even started. I should have stayed home the next morning. Truth is, I almost did. My hand still tingled from the weight of her flipper, and part of me worried I'd dreamed the whole thing. But habit yanked me down to the dock before dawn, and muscle memory carried me through untying lines and coaxing the motor awake. Fog again, thick, ragged curtains drifting over the water. The harbor lights smeared into ghosts while pelicans yawned on the pilings. I eased out of the slip, telling myself I was only checking crab pots. No nets today. No surprises. My heart wanted quiet. 10 minutes past the jetty I cut the engine and let the boat drift. The Pacific was flat slate, the color that swallows thoughts. I poured coffee, wrapped both hands around the mug, and stared into nothing. Something surfaced on the port side with the softest sigh. A ripple bumped the hull, just a nudge, polite as a knock. I held my breath, every muscle locked. Then a smooth gray head rose, droplets clinging like pearls. It was her. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't dare blink. She floated there, half submerged, as if judging whether I was real enough for a repeat performance. Then, slowly, she glided forward, closed the last few feet, and rested her muzzle on the gunwale exactly where she'd pressed her forehead yesterday. My coffee went cold between my palms. All I could manage was a whisper, "You came back." She didn't answer, of course, but somehow I felt an echo of yes vibrate through the wood. Her eyes were clearer this morning, almost shining in the weak light. No fear, no pain I could see, just a calm presence that wrapped around my chest and squeezed. For a full minute neither of us moved. I swear I heard her breathing, deep, even pulses that matched the slow rise and fall of the swells. Somewhere inside that rhythm my initial thrill curdled into worry. Why is she here? Is she hurt? Does she need something? The groove the net had carved around her middle was still visible, red-pink but no longer bleeding. Still, infection could set in. My gut twisted. I reached out, inches at a time, until my fingertips hovered over her crown. She stayed. The trust of it made my throat burn. Carefully, I grazed that metallic smooth skin, cool, firm, unbelievable. She closed her eyes, exhaled a long ribbon of bubbles. A shout broke the spell. "Hey, Cap! You see that?" I jerked up. A tourist skiff trolling closer to shore had spotted us. A couple on deck pointed phones in my direction, lenses winking. On the breakwater farther back, a pair of early joggers stopped, hands shading eyes. The town was waking, and watching. She must have felt the shift, because her head lifted. For a second I thought she'd sink out of sight. Instead she turned sideways, so everyone had a clean view of the raw mark on her flank, then angled back toward me, almost presenting the wound. A fresh wave of panic slammed me. She's showing them. Showing me. Asking for help? My mind scrambled through possibilities. Call the Marine Center, get a vet, find a sling. But beneath the fear pulsed something richer, deeper, an intuition that her visit wasn't about pain at all. I started to think maybe she was injured, I'd tell folks later, or begging me to fix the hurt I'd caused. But there was more. So much more. She dipped beneath the surface, circled once, and rose again, this time laying her entire side against the hull, as if anchoring herself to my world. The boat rocked gently under the weight, creaking like an old porch swing. I planted my palms on the railing to steady us both, tears stinging for reasons I couldn't name. The skiff idled closer, I heard excited chatter, the snap of shutters. Somewhere a gull screeched. Yet inside that little radius of water and wood, it felt like only she and I existed, bound by a secret neither of us fully understood. I leaned down, voice cracking, "You're safe, girl. I'm right here." She answered by tilting her head, pressing the spot just below her eye against the gunwale, almost nuzzling. It wasn't a plea. It was recognition. Connection. A moment so intimate I felt exposed, like she could read every mistake I'd ever made and forgive them in one breath. Then, without warning, she slid away, a single smooth arc of muscle and grace, and disappeared into the pewter deep. No splash. No fanfare. Just gone. I sagged onto the deck, heart battering my ribs. Relief, wonder, dread, each emotion chased the next in dizzy loops. Behind me, engines revved as the tourist boat headed back to the pier, the chatter already swelling into rumor. I could almost hear the headlines, "Old Fisherman Befriends Sea Creature. Moss Landing Miracle." I wished the story paused there, simple, sweet, but the ocean doesn't deal in tidy endings. Because even as I steadied my breathing, a new thought stabbed hard: if she came back once, she might come again. And what if next time she brings something I can't ignore? That question sat like a weight in my gut, dragging every shred of certainty overboard. And the tide kept rising. I tied up just after sunrise, nerves jangling from the second encounter. The docks were already buzzing, deckhands icing bait, gulls diving for scraps, diesel fumes thick as coffee. I jumped onto the planks and, against every instinct, opened my mouth. "Fellas, you won't believe what came to my boat again." That's all it took. First came the raised brows, then the smirks. Benny, the sardine skipper, laughed so hard his gut shook. "What did you smoke this time, Jack?" A couple of young crew guys flashed me goggle eyes and made flipper motions. One even barked like a sea lion. I told them anyway, how she'd rested her muzzle on the gunwale, how calm she was, how she looked at me like family. Words poured out faster than sense. I sounded insane even to myself, but once the dam cracked I couldn't stop. They humored me for a minute before drifting off. Nobody wants to linger with the old-timer spinning mermaid yarns at dawn. By mid-morning the story had spread through the Cannery Café, up the fuel dock, into the charter office. I heard snippets as I walked the pier: "That old coot, alien seal, needs a vacation." Nobody believed, and really, why should they? Miracles don't fit neat into dock chatter. That night I tried to sleep, but my mind replayed her quiet breath, her scar, her unshakable eyes. Why me? Why twice? I drifted off sometime after 2, haunted by the thought that the ocean was staging something I hadn't earned the right to witness. I hit the wharf early, hoping to slip out before tongue started wagging again. Fog still hugged the shoreline, but the pier was already dotted with tourists clutching lattes, waiting for whale-watch boats. Then a shout sliced the morning. "Look, there! In the marina!" I spun and stared down the long row of slips toward the public landing. Something gray broke the surface near the pilings, sleek, deliberate, moving against the outgoing tide. It was her. No mistaking that pewter hide or the graceful roll of her shoulders. A child squealed. Phones rose like a flock of blackbirds. The gray shape glided past the fuel dock, headed straight for the main pier where a half-circle of onlookers formed instantly. Even the gulls fell silent. My feet moved before thought caught up. I elbowed through the crowd, heart pounding. There she was, only a yard from the pilings, head angled upward so everyone could see her face. She wasn't stranded, she could have slipped away with a flick of her tail. Instead she hovered, holding herself in the surge as if presenting proof. Someone next to me whispered, "That's no sea lion I've ever seen." A deckhand leaned over, filming. A lady in a Monterey Bay aquarium jacket muttered about unusual pigmentation and dorsal morphology. But I saw only her eyes, those fathom-deep eyes fixed on me through the crush of bodies. There was wisdom in her eyes, and I felt, clear as a church bell, that she knew something about me no one else could. She angled her torso, exposing the raw groove from the net. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clicks, flashes, a chorus of notifications, her image flooded dozens of timelines at once. She held that pose for a breath, maybe two. Then, with the same calm dignity, she dipped beneath the surface, sending a small silver whirl against the pilings. Gone. The pier erupted, voices overlapping, theories colliding. A grizzled charter captain swore it was a seal hybrid. A college kid insisted on a cryptid TikTok. Someone yelled for fish and wildlife. I just stood there shaking, every rib buzzing like I'd been struck by lightning. Within an hour the video hit local feeds, Moss Landing mystery mammal, and hopped state lines before lunch. By the time I sat at the cafe counter for soup, the TV behind the register was replaying a shaky clip of her muzzle on my boat, overlaid with captions, "Unknown marine species bonds with fisherman." I slurped chowder I couldn't taste and listened to strangers argue about me 10 feet away. "He's making it up," a tourist said. "That animal's trained," another claimed. Benny swaggered in, saw the broadcast, and froze mid-step. His eyes flicked to mine, half disbelief, half apology. For a second the vindication felt sweet. Then it curdled. Because if the whole world started poking, prodding, sending drones and research vessels, what would become of her? I pictured tranquilizer darts, biopsy hooks, bright lights piercing the quiet places she called home. I thought, well, maybe she's just an animal after all. Nature's odd, shows up, disappears. Story over. But no. Something deeper rumbled beneath the surface of today's spectacle, like distant thunder rolling in over flat water. I left the bowl half finished, stepped outside, and stared at the harbor mouth where fog was burning off. Somewhere beyond that breakwater she waited, or watched, or planned her next impossible move. And I could feel the tide inside me turning, dragging every certainty out to sea. The rumors, the cameras, the skeptics, none of it mattered anymore. Because she was coming back. I knew it the way I knew tide charts and the taste of salt on fog. And whatever she brought next, was going to change more than just a fisherman's reputation. 3 days passed before I dared take the boat out again. Reporters still milled on the pier, drones buzzed like gnats over the bay. I slipped away in the pre-dawn dark, cut the engine beyond the breakwater, and let the quiet swallow me. The ocean was glass, no wind, no swell, only the hush of my own heartbeat. I dropped anchor and waited, not sure for what. A gull screeched somewhere behind the fog curtain. Otherwise, nothing. Part of me felt foolish, like a child clinging to a bedtime tale. Then a ripple stitched across the mirror-flat water, small, playful, heading straight for me. I leaned over the rail and saw her rise, smooth as oil. She stopped an arm's length away, eyes catching the dim light like polished stone. But she wasn't alone. Beside her surfaced a smaller shape, perhaps half her length, skin the same molten pewter sheen. A calf, her calf. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. She'd brought her young into a harbor thick with noise and strangers, to me. Why trust me that much? The little one bobbed, blinking at the world. Then, in a burst of joy, it spun belly up and slapped the surface with a stumpy flipper, sending rings across the stillness. I laughed out loud, a startled, breaking sound I hadn't made in years. Mama, yes, that's what I called her now, nudged the calf toward the hull. He, or she, bumped the wood, curious, then darted away in a loop, bubbles trailing like silver beads. Again and again, the small body circled, each pass a little braver, until it finally pressed its snout to the gunwale exactly where Mama had. I didn't move. Couldn't. The privilege of that trust pinned me to the deck more surely than chains. Every instinct said reach out, but I kept my hands tight on my knees. Don't ruin the gift. The calf's breath bubbled against the planks, its eyes, smaller, brighter, flicked between me and its mother. I felt witnessed, measured, accepted. That moment might have filled a lifetime, but Mama had more to say. She slid beneath the surface, leaving the calf to play, and vanished into green shadow. Seconds stretched. I scanned the water, pulse racing, afraid the noise from town had spooked her for good. A shape re-emerged on the starboard side, Mama, something clutched in her jaws. She paddled close and lifted her head, water streaming off that alien smooth brow. In her mouth dangled a narrow band of braided leather, swollen from years in the sea. My heart pitched. No. Couldn't be. She craned her neck and let the object drop onto the deck with a soft slap. I stared as salt water bled from the weave. A tarnished silver clasp, shaped like a crescent. I knew that clasp. I'd fastened it around my daughter Rosie's wrist on her 16th birthday, 30 years ago, the summer she lost it overboard while helping me haul lines. We searched an hour, then gave up to the tide. Rosie's bracelet, I whispered, voice shredded. My vision blurred. I picked it up, softer now, faded, but unmistakable. How deep had it sunk? How far had it drifted? And she found it? I looked into Mama's eyes, and a jolt ran through me, an understanding beyond words. This is yours. I kept it safe. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. Decades of tide and grief and silence washed through that tiny loop of leather. I pressed the bracelet to my chest and shook with quiet sobs. The calf chirped, a sharp, bright sound, then bumped my boot as if asking what was wrong. Nothing's wrong, I managed, wiping my face. Nothing at all. Mama watched, still and patient, until my breathing steadied. Then she dipped her head once, a gesture that felt like a bow, and nudged the calf away from the hull. Together they began a slow dance around the boat, circling, weaving, the calf darting in playful spurts, Mama keeping pace beside him. It felt less like random movement and more like a presentation. See, this is my world. I'm showing you because you're part of it now. Sunlight cracked the fog, scattering rose-gold shards across the water. In that glow mother and child shimmered like living mercury. I lost all sense of age, name, duty, only awe remained, raw and consuming. They made one final loop, then glided off toward open sea. The calf glanced back, one quick, curious look, before flicking its tail and vanishing behind a curtain of light. Silence rushed in, vast and holy. I gripped the rail, bracelet still pressed to my chest, and understood that I'd just been given something no researcher, no millionaire eco-tourist, could ever buy, a glimpse into a conversation the ocean usually holds only with itself. I didn't grasp it fully then. I kept trying to file her under rare animal, lucky encounter, anything that fit a man-sized logic. But Mama wasn't just a creature. She was a sign. And I had no idea how many layers of meaning she still planned to unfold. Every morning before dawn I'd wake from the same dream, Mama's flipper pressing my palm, the calf swirling like quicksilver, and feel a surge of joy that curdled into dread the second my feet touched the floor. Loving the sea had always been simple: haul the catch, mend the gear, respect the weather. Now it felt complicated, fragile, too dear to risk. So I made a decision I'd never made in 40+ years. I stayed ashore. The skiff sat tied to the dock, nets drying stiff in the sun, deck gathering gull droppings and wind-blown kelp. I told the boys at the cafe my back was acting up, half true, I guess. Mostly it was my heart. Every beat seemed tethered to that gray shimmer under the water, and I worried if I saw her again I'd never find the will to let her go. Instead I parked myself on the bluff above the harbor with a pair of old binoculars and pretended I was just another retiree killing time. From up there I could see the mouth of the bay, the marinas, the parade of whale-watch boats. I scanned the water till my eyes stung, searching for a pewter flash or a playful ripple, anything that might be her. Nothing. Day 2, same routine. Fog burned off by 10, tourists poured in, chatter about the mystery mammal still bounced around town, but the ocean kept her secrets. By evening my stomach ached from the hollow space where wonder used to sit. Day 3 I whispered a bargain to the surf. If she doesn't come today, I'll let it rest. I'll leave her be. The tide rose, fell, rose again, just ordinary water wearing an extraordinary mask, and I almost believed myself safe. But night was worst. I'd lie in the dark, Rosie's bracelet looped around my wrist, and feel the weight of that gift like an unanswered question. Why me? Why now? What am I supposed to do with this knowing? On the 5th morning I finally carried a camp chair to the very end of the breakwater, closer than the bluff but still on solid ground. The air tasted of diesel and seaweed, pelicans skimmed low, beaks clicking. I sat, hands in pockets, and let the swells roll beneath the rocks. Hours passed. Fisherman motored out and back. A pod of bottlenose dolphins leapt beyond the kelp beds, beautiful, ordinary magic. I watched without moving. The sun climbed. Shadows shortened. Hope thinned to a thread. I thought, well, that's the story, Jack. She came, she showed you something precious, and now she's gone. Miracles are like shooting stars, you don't chase them, you remember them. I felt the surrender settle in my bones, heavy but weirdly calm. The wonder was real once, and once had to be enough. I packed the chair, dusted sand off my pants, and turned toward home. That's when the gulls went silent. You learn out here that gulls never hush without reason. I pivoted back to the water, heart tripping. Waves rolled steady, nothing strange, until a long, dark shadow slid just beneath the surface past the lighthouse point. Too big for a sea lion, too solitary for dolphins. I lifted the binoculars, breath snagged in my throat. The shadow turned, cutting a slow arc toward the breakwater, toward me. Glass fogged as the shape rose and fell in lazy intervals, closing distance. 50 yards, 40, 30. But when the water broke, it wasn't Mama's sleek silver head. It was a humpback's tail, black and barnacled, slapping the surface before the whale dove, leaving only turbulence behind. Beautiful, yes, but not the impossible visitor my soul ached for. I laughed, a short, cracked sound, at my own desperation. I thought, it's over. The miracle came and went, and life is ordinary again. I can live with that. I headed down the rocks, mind already rehearsing how I'd slip back into routine, check engines, oil the winch, set nets tomorrow. Normal is good, I told myself. Normal doesn't break your heart. But as dusk settled, painting the sky bruised purple, I paused at the bow of my idle skiff and laid a hand on the worn rail where Mama once rested her flipper. The wood still smelled of salt and sun-baked tar. I closed my eyes, and in the hush between waves felt a throb of something vast and unfinished, like a tide pulling at the pilings. Maybe it was only memory. Maybe only the echo of her weight against the hull. Either way it wrapped around me gentle as a lullaby, and I understood the ocean wasn't done speaking. Staying ashore wouldn't quiet the call, it would only drown me in slower waters. That night, as I locked the truck and headed up the driveway, I whispered into the coastal wind, "If there's more, show me when you're ready." The breeze carried the scent of brine and fog, no omen, no reply. Just the living breath of the Pacific, steady and patient. I slept dreamless, convinced I'd made peace with silence. I truly believed the wonder had ended, that a man could touch the edge of mystery once and then step back into the small, safe pattern of days. I thought the sea had finished its story with me. But I was wrong. The letter showed up on a Thursday, wedged under my front door mat, the envelope soft with fog dew. No return address, just my name in shaky ballpoint. Inside was a single line of hurried print. "They pulled a dead one out past Jetty 3. Looks like yours." My legs went hollow. The bracelet on my wrist felt suddenly heavy, like a lead weight tied to memory. I grabbed the truck keys with hands that wouldn't close right and tore down the coast road, headlights carving pale scars in the early dusk. Fishermen are no strangers to death. Nets bring up bodies, storms take friends. But the thought of her, of Mama, washed ashore, belly to the sky, eyes glazed to nothing, it cracked something raw inside me. The crowd stood in a loose ring near the waterline, flashlight beams jittering over a shape stretched on wet sand. Sheriff tape fluttered in the wind, useless against the hush that blanketed everyone. I shoved past a deputy, couldn't feel my feet. One look dropped me to a crouch. Same pewter hide, same sleek head. But smaller, maybe younger. No scar across the midsection. Strangers knelt, snapping photos, whispering about necropsies and new species. Their words buzzed like flies while my pulse hammered in my ears. Not her. Please, not her. I brushed my fingers over the creature's flank. Cold already. I whispered a clumsy prayer, half apology, half lullaby, and when I stood, tears blurred the lights along the pier. If this one was gone, what if she was next? Terror gnawed the edges of my breath. The sea suddenly felt vast in a cruel way, miles of darkness that swallow without a trace. I drove home on autopilot, heart drumming, palms numb on the wheel. In the driveway I shut off the engine but stayed seated, staring at nothing while night seeped through the windows. At some point I realized I was rocking, the way a man does when he's trying not to break. Around midnight I found myself back at the dock, boots thudding on planks slick with tide spray. I hadn't meant to come, yet here I was, drawn as surely as a moon-pulled current. The harbor slept, masts ticking, halyards clinking, sodium lamps buzzing like tired fireflies. I stepped onto the skiff, decks faintly glowing under the dock lights. For a long minute I just stood there, the bracelet cool against my wrist, the memory of that cold body on the beach wedged behind my ribs like broken glass. A ripple tapped the hull. Once. Twice. I held my breath. Nothing. Probably a stray swell. I sagged onto a coil of rope, head in hands, letting grief roll through me. Then the boat listed, gentle but definite, as though nudged by a steady shoulder. I froze. Another nudge, softer, followed by the hush of water parted by something large and deliberate. I lifted my eyes, and there she was. Mama rose beside the gunwale, silver hide glowing under the dock light, water streaming off her brow. Alive. Whole. Her breath puffed in quiet clouds, and those fathom-deep eyes locked on mine. Strength drained from my knees. I slid to the deck boards, barely catching myself on trembling palms. My body folded, forehead pressed to the wood, heart pounding like a drum of pure relief. When I finally looked up, she was still there, waiting. She knew I'd come. She waited. And in her eyes was, "I'm right here." I reached out, hands shaking. She leaned closer until our shadows touched, and in that hush I felt sorrow bleed into awe. The dead calf on the sand, the cameras, the tapes, they were real, but they weren't the whole story. Life and loss ride the same tide. Tonight, life was the one that surfaced. Mama slid a fraction closer and exhaled, warm mist brushing my face. In the faint light I saw her flank, no fresh wounds, no infection. She was healthy, strong. My tears came hot and helpless, carving salt tracks down weathered cheeks. "I thought I lost you," I whispered. The words cracked apart. "I'm so damn sorry." She answered without sound, a slow blink, a steady gaze, a presence that filled the boat with something bigger than language. The harbor, the town, the whole restless world shrank to that one small arc of water between us. Minutes passed, or hours, I couldn't tell. Finally she dipped her head, brushed the hull with her muzzle as if sealing a promise, and slipped beneath the dark, leaving a soft eddy that rocked the skiff like a cradle. I stayed kneeling long after the ripples smoothed, lungs hitching, heart finally easing from panic to humbled wonder. The sea around me felt different, sadder, yes, for the young one lost, but also fiercely alive, determined to keep singing. I understood then that the story wasn't about whether she would return, it was about what I would do with the days she gave me. The ocean had handed me a truth heavy as the deep itself: every meeting is a gift, and every gift carries a cost. As dawn's first gray thread unstitched the night, I tied off the skiff and headed up the pier, legs shaky but eyes clear. The bracelet glinted against my pulse, a reminder and a vow. There was more ahead. Mama had shown me that. And when the sea called next, I'd be ready, not just to witness, but to carry her story wherever it needed to go. The morning she chose for goodbye came with nothing special to hint at it, no blood-red sunrise, no strange pull in the tide. I just woke before dawn, slipped into my boots, and felt a quiet tug behind the ribs that said, "Get on the water." No cameras followed anymore, the news cycle had moved on to fresher storms. The skiff and I pushed past the breakwater alone. Fog hung low, muffling the world to a circle of pewter sea and the faint glow of Moss Landing's lights behind me. I killed the motor and let the boat drift. The silence felt thick enough to cup in both hands. 10 heartbeats later, a shadow rolled beside the bow, slow, certain. Mama surfaced, exhaling a plume that curled like smoke in the cool air. My chest tightened, but not with surprise, something deeper had already known she'd be here. "Morning, girl," I whispered. She circled once, twice, the water dimpling under her weight. Each pass brushed the hull, a muted thump like a heartbeat under wood. Then she slipped under the starboard side and rose on port, carving a slow figure 8 around the skiff. A dance, almost. Farewell steps written in salt water. Sunlight pushed through the fog in thin spears, turning her skin to molten silver. She paused broadside, I just above the surface, and I knelt so our gazes leveled. I saw no pain there, no question, only calm, immense and unshakable. My reflection trembled in that dark well, small and mortal. The calf's absence hit me like a cold wave. I wondered if she searched for the little one, if she mourned. But her breath stayed steady, her movements deliberate, as though accepting the ledger the ocean keeps for every living thing. She dove, then resurfaced an arm's reach away with a swirl that lapped the gunwale. For a breath I thought she might press her flipper to my hand again. Instead she drifted back, giving me the whole of her, tip to tail, as if saying remember me like this, alive, unbroken, free. I wanted words big enough to honor the moment, some eloquent vow that I'd carry her story faithfully. All I managed was a ragged, thank you. It felt smaller than a pebble dropped into the trench, but it was all the truth I had. A breeze stirred, shifting the fog. She turned toward open water. My pulse kicked, don't go yet. But I kept still. This was her script, not mine. One last time she cut a wide arc around the boat, wake rocking the skiff in a gentle cradle. Near the stern she rose higher, half her body clear of the water, and loosed a single, low chirr that vibrated through the deck into my bones. Then she slipped beneath the surface with a slow, deliberate roll, tail sliding after like the closing line of a signature. I stayed frozen, eyes fixed on the widening rings until they blurred with the tremor of tears. Minutes passed, maybe more. The horizon brightened, gulls began their morning quarrel. But the water where she'd vanished smoothed to mirror glass, no shadow, no ripple, nothing of her except the echo warming my chest. I waited another hour, scanning every flash of kelp and cresting seal head, willing her to appear again. She didn't. At last I started the engine and pointed the bow toward harbor, the bracelet on my wrist tapping the helm with each small shiver of the boat. Halfway in, the sun burned the last veil of fog off the bay. The sea beneath turned clear jade, and for a breath I imagined I saw her below, pacing me in the deep. But it was only light bending, nature's quiet reminder that some mysteries stay under the skin of the world where hands can't reach. Back at the dock I tied off, stepped onto the plank, and paused. The harbor sounds, clanging shackles, laughing crews, diesel coughs, felt softer, as though some inner gauge had reset. I realized the fear that had chased me for weeks was gone. In its place lay a calm acceptance shaped like her final gaze. I walked up the pier without looking back. I kept expecting another morning, another ripple, another miracle. I thought I'd see her again. But nature always leaves when it's time. And if you ever feel a hush roll over the water, and your heart stutters for a reason you can't name, remember, sometimes the wild turns its face to us just long enough to give everything it has, then slips away before we can break the gift. I wish I could say life slipped back into its old grooves, but a story like ours leaves footprints on every shore it touches. Word spread the way salt creeps into wood, slow, patient, unstoppable. A kayak guide swore he glimpsed a silver figure shadowing his tour near the kelp forest. A surfer paddling pre-dawn claimed a smooth head rose beside him, stared a moment, then slid away without a sound. An old Ohlone woman who gathers sea grass for baskets told reporters the creature wasn't an animal at all but an Amatiwek, a spirit that guards the channel mouth. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had proof that stuck. Phones caught ripples, silhouettes, flares of pewter under green water, but nothing as sharp as those eyes I knew. Still, the town leaned into the legend like sailors to a fair wind. The tourist board printed t-shirts, Moss Landing, chosen by the sea. Restaurants renamed chowders. Local kids painted murals of a silver guardian circling a battered fishing skiff, its wake full of stars. The museum on Main cleared a corner near the whale skeleton for a new exhibit. They called it, "The Sea Soul Who Chose a Man." Inside a glass case they laid out the torn mesh I'd given them, those ragged ropes still crusted with salt, next to blown-up frames from the dockside video and a photo of my calloused hand holding Rosie's weather-beaten bracelet. A little plaque read, "Recovered by an unknown marine mammal, June 20th. Presented to Fisherman Jack Collins. Evidence of interspecies recognition." School groups gathered there in hushed clumps, eyes wide, listening to docents spin the tale of how something wild had broken every rule of fear. I stood in that hall once, feeling strangers study my face like another artifact. I caught pieces of their whispers, lucky, crazy, blessed, and none of the words fit. Because luck feels light and blessing feels clean, but what I carried was heavy with salt and silence and a responsibility I still couldn't name. Halfway through the exhibit a knot rose in my throat. I slipped outside before it could break. On the steps I leaned against redwood siding, watching fog snake up the street. My fingers traced the bracelet on my wrist, the leather softened by each tide of pulse. That's when the thought hit, if your heart just went quiet reading this, subscribe. Because whoever feels that hush already knows the ocean tells the truth louder than any headline. Don't scroll past the pulse that stops your breath. Stay with it. Follow this channel. Here, we don't sell fairy tales. We share the pulse of the real wild. Life kept moving, as it does. Boats still left at dawn, gulls still stole bait, and I still mended nets, though sometimes my hands stilled mid-knot, caught by the echo of a muzzle resting on weathered wood. Nights, I'd walk the jetty and let the wind slap my cheeks raw, half hoping to see her rolling under moon shards. I never did. One evening Benny from the sardine boat matched my stride. He cleared his throat, scuffing boot tips on the rocks. "Jack, you ever think she'll come back?" I pictured that final sunrise, the silent dance, the figure-eight farewell, her single exhalation hanging like incense between sky and sea. "I used to," I said. "Now I think she already gave me everything she meant to." Benny nodded, eyes on the dark water. We stood there until the lighthouse beam swept over us, and neither of us spoke again. People still corner me at the cafe, ask what she was, why she chose me, where she went. I tell them the truest words I have. I can't explain it. But I touched something that wasn't supposed to happen, and it rearranged the furniture in my soul. I'm not the man I was before her eyes found mine. Some folks leave disappointed, science offers no neat boxes for wonder. Others sit back, shivering, as if the room just tilted toward a wider horizon. I've learned to live with the unanswered. The bracelet stays on my wrist, the groove of its clasp is a compass needle that points inward, reminding me to keep that space open where the impossible once breathed. Because here's the quiet thunder at the core of it all. This could not have happened. But I saw it. I felt it. And if destiny ever sets a gaze on you that drills straight through skin to the soft gears of your heart, you'll understand. The wild carries knowledge older than our maps, and sometimes, just sometimes, it chooses to share a single sentence with a human ear. When that moment comes, hold it like fire cupped in both palms. Don't try to cage it with reasons. Let it burn a shape into you that no tide can erase. If the pulse in your chest is hammering right now, if your throat's tight because a part of you recognizes what I'm saying, then write it in the open where the algorithms can't drown us. We are not alone in this world. That's it. No argument, no proof link, just the 6 words that keep the doors cracked for wonder. Because the sea is still out there, breathing. And I have a feeling she's still listening.
When I heard a faint cry deep in the woods, My heart skipped a beat because I knew that sound wasn't just an accident. At first, I thought it was the wind twisting through the branches, the kind of lonely whistle that makes you pull your jacket tighter and keep walking. But then it came again, soft, sharp, and so full of need it stopped me cold. I stood there, listening. The forest was still. No birds, no rustle of leaves, just that tiny, broken sound. My boots sank into the damp earth as I turned, scanning the trees. I don't know why my chest felt so tight. It was just a sound, right? And then I saw it. Pressed against the gnarled roots of a fallen oak was a small gray shape, shaking so hard it barely looked alive. A kitten, out here, in the middle of nowhere. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. There were no houses for miles, no trails except the one I'd taken. How had it survived this far in? I crouched slowly, like any sudden move might shatter it. Its fur was matted, clinging to its tiny frame, and its eyes, God, those eyes, they were too big for its face, glassy and wet, locked on mine like I was the first human it had ever seen. "Hey, hey, little one," I whispered, because it felt wrong to speak loud in that silence. It didn't move, didn't hiss, didn't even flinch, just stared at me with this desperate stillness, like it had run out of ways to fight and was waiting for something, anything to happen. I held out my hand, expecting it to bolt the second I came close, but it didn't. When my fingers brushed its fur, it made this sound, not a meow, not even a cry, just a breath, like relief. And then, when I stood up, it did something that broke me. It tried to follow. Its tiny paws dragged through the mud, wobbling, weak, but it kept coming. I took a step back, and it pressed against my boot, clinging like I was the last solid thing in its world. I swear to you, in that moment, something inside me shifted. I'd come out here to clear my head, to be alone. I wasn't looking for anything, least of all this fragile life staring up at me like I was its only chance. What was I supposed to do? Leave it? Walk away and pretend I never heard that cry? Not after those eyes. I scooped it up, feeling bones under fur, the faint thud of a racing heart against my palm. It was so light, it didn't even feel real. And yet, holding it, I felt this strange weight settle on me, like the forest had handed me a secret. As I started back toward the trail, the kitten curled against my chest and let out the tiniest sigh, like it had been holding its breath for days. And I thought, that's it. That's the story. A lost kitten, a random act of kindness, and now we both get to go home. If only I had known. That was the beginning of something I can't explain to this day. When I got home, I didn't even know where to start. A kitten in the forest. How does that happen? I thought maybe someone nearby was missing it, so I put up flyers, called shelters, even asked neighbors. Days passed. Nothing. No one came forward. The little thing stayed with me, curled up in a worn-out box lined with an old sweater. At first, it seemed like any other scared, abandoned animal. But soon, the kitten started doing things that made me wonder if I was losing my mind. At night, it would wake me up, not just with the usual meowing or scratching, but by staring, fixated, at the window, eyes wide, unblinking, as if waiting for something that I couldn't see. I'd lie there, heart pounding, watching it sit perfectly still, almost like a guardian keeping watch over some secret. I started noticing things about those eyes. They weren't kitten's eyes. They were too knowing, too deep. One night, I remember it so clearly, I sat up in bed and whispered, "What are you waiting for?" The kitten didn't blink. It just stared into the darkness beyond the glass, and I felt like I was looking at something ancient, something that had seen things no human could ever understand. I tried to shake it off as imagination. I told myself maybe the kitten was just scared, or maybe I was exhausted and reading too much into it. But every night, the same ritual, the same silence, the same stare. It followed me everywhere during the day, clinging to my legs, rubbing its head against me like it was trying to say, "Don't forget." And then came the seventh night. I thought maybe I was just overthinking everything. Maybe the kitten was just a lost little soul needing comfort, and that was the whole story. But the seventh night changed everything. That night, the silence in the house was different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. The kitten got up from its bed, walked to the window, and sat down as usual. But this time, I saw something I'd never seen before. Its eyes reflected a light, not from inside the room, but from deep outside. A glow that wasn't from any street lamp or passing car. Something wild, something alive. For a moment, I could have sworn the kitten's gaze pierced through the glass, through the darkness, right into my soul, and I felt it, the impossible truth settling like a stone in my chest. This little creature wasn't just lost, it was waiting for something, someone. If only I had known then what was coming. The morning light spilled weakly through my bedroom window, soft and pale, like the world was still waking up. But when I reached out to the spot where the kitten usually slept, curled up tight, it was empty. Gone. Panic slammed into me harder than I expected. I called its name, heart racing, shaking the blankets aside like a man desperate for a lifeline. The house was silent, too silent. I ran outside, into the cool morning air, and called again. No answer, no rustle. No sign of anything but the faint smell of damp earth and pine. I searched everywhere, the garden, the porch, under the bushes, but it was like the kitten had vanished into thin air. The fear clawed at my throat. How could something so small disappear without a trace? I knew the forest was close by. I hesitated, but the silence in the house was worse than the unknown out there. So I stepped onto the familiar trail, calling softly. Branches snapped underfoot. The morning mist clung to the trees like a secret. My voice echoed, but no kitten answered. Then I heard it. Low, deep growls rolling through the shadows like thunder wrapped in velvet. My breath caught. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up like a warning. I thought of turning back, running home where it was safe. But something, maybe the memory of those knowing eyes, made me keep moving forward. I followed the sound, heart hammering, until the trees opened into a small clearing. And there it was, the kitten, sitting calmly, not an ounce of fear in its body. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, just beyond the edge of the trees, a massive shape loomed, enormous, dark, almost unreal in the early dawn light. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. The growls came from this creature, a cougar, its fur mottled and thick, its eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. The kitten looked up at me, then back at the cougar. It didn't flinch, didn't move away. It sat there like the king of this wild kingdom, fearless and sure. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't lost, it wasn't scared, it was leading me. This wasn't a random rescue. It was a message, a connection that stretched far beyond anything I had ever believed possible. I swallowed hard, feeling something shift inside me, a mixture of fear, awe, and an overwhelming sense that I had stepped into a story much bigger than myself. My legs felt like they were filled with lead, but I forced myself forward, each step shaking with a mixture of fear and something I couldn't quite name. My heart hammered in my chest, loud enough to drown out the low growls that echoed through the trees. The cougar was massive, far bigger than I'd imagined from a distance. Its coat was mottled with dirt and blood, and one of its front legs hung awkwardly, clearly wounded. It limped slightly, eyes sharp but tired. The kitten moved toward the cougar without hesitation, weaving through the tall grass and rubbing its tiny head gently against the cougar's face like it was family. Not prey, not plaything, but kin. I expected a roar or a swipe, some sign that I was an intruder, a threat. But there was nothing. The cougar didn't attack. It watched me, steady and calm, as if it understood I was part of something larger, as if it recognized me. In that moment, my fear twisted into awe. This was no ordinary wild beast. There was something sacred in the way it let me approach, in the way it tolerated my trembling hands reaching out, hesitant to touch. If a predator, fierce, powerful, untamed, could show gratitude and trust, what excuse did we humans have? I knelt down slowly beside them, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. The wound was bad, raw and angry, but the cougar's eyes held a quiet acceptance, like it knew I was here to help. I thought maybe, after all this, it would just let me go, that I could turn around, walk back through the forest, and leave this impossible encounter behind. But no, something bigger was coming. A silence settled, thick and deep, like the forest itself was waiting for what would happen next. And I realized this was far from over. The cougar's limp was worse than I'd first thought. Every step it took was a silent struggle, muscles tense, breathing shallow. It moved with pain, but it didn't run. It stayed. The kitten kept looking at me, those eyes full of something urgent, almost pleading, like it was asking me to choose, to stay or to leave. I could feel my own fear rising. Run. Get out while you still can. This is a wild animal, a predator. What if it turns on me? What if I make it worse? But then I looked into those deep, patient eyes of the cougar, and I knew I couldn't walk away. I dropped to my knees beside it, hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the cloth I'd found in my backpack. For hours, I worked quietly, cleaning the wound as best as I could. The smell of earth and blood filled my nostrils. I talked to it softly, not knowing if it understood my words, but hoping the calm in my voice would reach it. Every time I looked up, the cougar was watching me, steady, unflinching. It trusted me more than I trusted myself. I thought that had to be the miracle, the moment when everything changed, when a wild, fierce creature put its fate in the hands of a stranger. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, and for a moment, I dared to believe that maybe I was part of something sacred. But nature wasn't done with me yet. There was more to see, more to understand, and the story I thought I knew was only just beginning. I was halfway through cleaning the wound when I heard it, a heavy rustling, like thunder in the trees. My heart seized. Out of the shadows stepped another cougar, bigger, broader. Its fur was darker, muscles rippling under the morning light, eyes like molten gold locked onto me with a gaze so fierce I thought I'd freeze forever. I couldn't move, my breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed, run, hide, survive, but my body stayed rooted, trapped by fear and awe. The second cougar didn't growl or charge. It just stood there, silent and still, watching me as if weighing my soul. And then something unbelievable happened. The kitten, fearless as ever, slipped between the two massive beasts, weaving like a tiny ambassador of peace. It rubbed against their legs, purred softly, and for a moment, the tension in the clearing dissolved. I realized then, this wasn't chance. This was something deeper, something I couldn't control. In that moment, I understood. I was part of their story now. A thread woven into the wild fabric of their lives, a witness to something sacred and raw. I thought maybe this was it. Maybe the cougars would turn and disappear back into the forest, leaving me stunned but safe. But no, something shifted in the air. The second cougar stepped forward, brushing past me, its breath warm and steady. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from fear, but from a strange, overwhelming sense of connection. Nature had chosen to speak to me in a language I almost understood, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this night would change me forever. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the two cougars didn't turn away. Instead, they began to move, slow, deliberate steps into the thickening woods. The kitten darted ahead like a guide, fearless and sure. My legs trembled, but I followed, heart pounding in a mix of fear and something like wonder. I wasn't sure what I was doing out here, walking side by side with wild predators, but it felt as if I had no choice. The trees grew denser, the shadows longer. Every sound, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves, felt amplified. Yet the cougars moved with quiet confidence, as if this path was theirs alone. I kept my distance, but they made no move to chase me away. The kitten glanced back, then forward again, its tiny form weaving through the forest like a silent herald. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a clearing hidden beneath the thick canopy, and there, nestled in a bed of moss and leaves, were the cubs, newborns, fragile and blind, sleeping peacefully beneath the watchful eyes of their mother. I dropped to my knees, the rawness of the moment washing over me like cold water. Life so pure, so vulnerable, it struck a chord deeper than I could have imagined. The cougars didn't seem to mind my presence, their fierce protectiveness softened by a quiet trust. I looked down at those tiny creatures, and tears welled in my eyes, not just for their innocence, but because the wild had trusted me with its most sacred secret, a secret so fragile, so profound, it changed everything I thought I knew about nature and about myself. The moment felt suspended in time. The cougars melted back into the shadows of the forest, moving silently as if they were part of the mist itself. The great male and the injured female vanished between the trees without a sound. But the kitten stayed. It turned once, its eyes locking with mine, clear, unafraid, filled with a quiet understanding that reached deeper than words ever could. It was a farewell, but not a goodbye. The tiny creature gave a last gentle glance, then disappeared with a sudden burst of energy, darting into the thick woods and vanishing from sight. I stood there, frozen. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. The journey back felt endless. Each step echoed in my bones. My hands trembled, my breath was shallow, and my mind raced with the impossible truth I had just lived through. I was alone again, but nothing was the same. The forest no longer felt like a place to escape to. It was a living, breathing world filled with secrets, kindness, and fierce protectors that I had never imagined. I swear on my life, if someone told me this story, I wouldn't believe them. But I saw it. I was there, and I will never see the world the same way again. Sometimes words hit harder than fists, and that day, nature spoke louder than any scream. If your heart is racing right now, you understand. Follow for more true stories. Nature doesn't want you to forget. If you've ever seen a miracle in the wild, right, nature never forgets. Because after what I saw, I believe it.